about the cause of death.
When you have major high-speed...
The following program deals with controversial subjects. The theories, opinions, and beliefs expressed are not the only possible interpretation. Viewers are invited to make a judgment based on all available information.
If what you are about to see is real, it's the most startling film footage in history. Although we remain skeptical, some experts believe this is authentic footage of an alien life form. Real or not, we must warn you. This appears to be an actual autopsy. And some of the footage you will see in the next hour is very gruesome. Stay with us as we put the question to you. Alien autopsy, fact or fiction?
There must have been alien bodies.
If the footage is authentic, that pretty well proves it. We've learned that aliens are visiting the Earth.
Daddy said they looked like a small 10-year-old child.
You could have the proof that this actually was an extraterrestrial craft.
I'm not seeing a liver over to the right. I'm seeing a mass that I cannot readily explain. And I have great difficulty in correlating this with any human body that I have seen.
This really felt like a real body that was being cut open.
It's the story of the millennium.
If it's a true document, it is a document of exceptional importance. If it's a fake, it should be hailed as one of the most extraordinary fakes ever put together by a filmmaker.
This is the Army airfield in Roswell, New Mexico. During World War II, this was the base of the elite 509th Bomb Group. The Enola Gay that dropped the atomic bomb on Japan originated from here. The men and women who lived and worked here were used to keeping secrets. But in the summer of 1947, something definitely crashed just outside of town. And 48 years later, it remains a mystery.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
I was called to headquarters, was given copies of a press release which stated in essence that we had in our possession a flying disc. I was told to hand deliver to the 4 news media we had in town at that time. We had 2 radio stations and 2 newspapers.
Walter Haut was the public relations officer for the 509th Bomb Group. His press release quickly made the rounds to the radio networks and evening papers around the country, feeding the curiosity of a nation where hundreds of flying disc sightings had been reported in recent months. But it was over almost as soon as it began. Within 4 hours, General Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force, had taken charge, issuing a new statement. It wasn't a flying disc at all.
Everybody believed it, that it was a weather balloon. The way it was handled, it was a real slick way. Say, yes, we've got a flying saucer, and then have a general who is much more knowledgeable, naturally, say, no, that was a new type of weather balloon.
But the residents of Roswell knew it was something more than a weather balloon.
My father was on the intelligence team at the Roswell Army Airfield, and it was his job to look at what they thought was a crashed aircraft or crashed something out there out of Roswell. When he came in, he was very excited. He woke my mother and myself up at must have been 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and he wanted us to see what he was bringing in from the field. He said, this is parts of a flying saucer, and it was all brought in and spread out on the kitchen floor, and we just looked at it. You know, I picked up this particular I-beam and held it up to my upper left to look at it with the kitchen light reflecting on the inner surface. And that's when I saw the writing, or the symbols of some sort. I thought at first, this is hieroglyphics or some kind of writing like that. It certainly looked alien to me.
This film footage purportedly shows the actual crash debris, carefully cataloged and placed on display. It is shown here for the first time anywhere.
The debris in the film was somewhat different than the debris that I saw on the kitchen floor. Certainly the symbols on the so-called I-beam were much larger. The size of the beams are certainly different. The one I saw was probably greatest 3/8 of an inch in cross-sectional diameter, 12 to 18 inches long. The beam in the film certainly was much larger than this, several inches in cross-sectional diameter. If this is an authentic film, then it could have come from a different portion of the craft. Actually, the material that I saw almost resembled something that could have been blown out through the side of the craft, like there was an in-flight explosion just spreading debris or blowing debris out of the side of the craft.
Even more intriguing than the I-beams with the cryptic symbols is the metal fixture, obviously designed for some being with 6 fingers on each hand.
You wonder if that might not have been some sort of control mechanism, that they put their hands in the grooves that are made for that, and maybe there's some way they can control the craft just by thought transference, by thinking about something with the hands in contact with this plate, that maybe it's some very unusual, very weird control mechanism.
While researching a book on the incident, author Kevin Randall discovered that more people had handled the crash debris than anyone had ever suspected.
I think at last count, I had spoken to around 4 dozen people who handled various aspects of the debris. The most dramatic is the foil-like material that you could wad up into a ball and let it go and it would unfold itself.
They tried to burn it and they couldn't burn it. It wouldn't catch on fire, and they took out their pocket knives and they tried to cut it, and they couldn't cut it.
Frankie Rowe had watched as her father, the Roswell fire captain, and his crew played with a piece of the strange metal.
I guess they all had their chance to play with it for a while, and it was laying on the table, so I reached over and picked it up. And I played for it probably about 5 minutes. When you would wad it up in your hand, you couldn't feel it in your hand. You couldn't feel you had anything there. And it would go to a size that was so small that you'd have to look to see if it was still in your hand. And then when you drop it, it spread out all over the table.
I sincerely believe we had the crash of something from outer space, because we still don't have materials that compare with the descriptions I've gotten of the material that was picked up out on the ranch and brought into town.
If there was any doubt that a flying saucer had crashed, Frankie Rowe's father, one of the first at the crash site, had seen the most convincing proof of all. Living proof.
Daddy came in so excited, and he said what they saw was not from this world. There were 2 bodies that were laying on the ground outside of this craft, and that there was one, what he called little person. And he said there's one little person that was walking around, and he said they were still alive. And he said that the other 2 were dead, and that this one that was alive was very sad. My dad would not have gotten excited over a weather balloon. He was not easily excitable. And this is the most thrilled I'd ever seen him in my life. He thought that was the most fantastic thing in the world.
Through his numerous interviews with those connected to the Roswell incident, Kevin Randall has been able to put together a sequence of events from the time the spacecraft and bodies were recovered.
The best evidence we have from a number of eyewitness sources is that the craft and the bodies were brought to Hangar 84 on the Roswell Army Airfield and stored overnight before transport. What we understand from the eyewitness testimony is the bodies were sealed in a large wooden crate kept at the center of the hangar. It's absolutely brilliant what they did. They announced they have a flying saucer, but they've already captured it. They've already got it. There's nothing to see, so nobody goes out looking for the thing. Then they shift everything to Fort Worth. The higher headquarters says, no, those guys made a mistake. It was just a weather balloon. The press can't find Jesse Marcel because he's in Fort Worth and he's been silenced.
You know, when he came back from Carswell, after flying the debris, he did tell me not to talk about this, told my mother not to talk about this. This is a non-event. Play like it never happened. Don't even talk about this with your friends, which I didn't. And years later, he confided that he was actually part of the cover-up because he went along with the Air Force explanation, even though he knew full well that that was not true.
There's corroborative testimony that suggests somebody was putting pressure on people to silence them, and they used what means were necessary to keep those people silent. With the military people, it was merely the threat of imprisonment and going to jail because they understood that. With some of the civilians, they were told that if you ever talk about it, you will be killed.
In the case of Frankie Rowe, a military officer came to ask her about the strange piece of metal that she had handled.
I said, yes, I did handle it. And he started emphasizing, no, you didn't. Well, my mother was pretty strict, and we didn't lie. So I'm insistent that, yes, I saw it, yes, I held it. And he got mad, and he got louder, and he had one of those, looks like a small baseball bat that hooks on the side of your belt, and he took that out, and he's holding it, and he starts beating his hand. Every time he said something, he would hit that on his hand, and he would say, I want you to understand, you were never there. You did not see anything. You did not hear a conversation. And he said, if you can't understand this, there are things that we can do. He said, we can take you out here in the middle of this desert. He said, this is a big desert here. He said, no one will ever find your bodies, ever. No one will ever know what happened to you. He said, the only way I'm going to let you stay around or live is if you promise you'll never talk about this the rest of your life. So I told him I wouldn't.
The people of Roswell kept quiet about what they saw. Supposedly, under tight security, everything from the crash was loaded onto planes. Many believe the debris was flown to Wright Airfield in Dayton, Ohio. The bodies were thought to have been flown somewhere else. The government wanted the story to die, and for decades, the cover-up was successful. But what may be the most convincing evidence somehow escaped detection. Here in the desert just outside Roswell is where the alleged crash happened some 50 years ago. Was it a flying saucer? Were there alien bodies on board? Or was it just a weather balloon, as the Air Force claimed? People still come and look for some kind of clue. But the evidence of the alien crash didn't come from here. It was revealed halfway around the world.
An alien autopsy is always going to be the subject of ridicule. Who's going to believe that an alien autopsy is an alien autopsy? It's just a ridiculous subject.
Ray Santilli owns a small music and video distribution company in London. He was acquiring some 1950s rock and roll footage when an elderly American cameraman he had been dealing with said, by the way, I have something else to show you.
And, you know, we looked at it, and it was just the most incredible piece of film. And obviously, my first impression is, this can't be real.
What Santilli saw and eventually purchased were reels of black and white film showing an autopsy being performed on a strange humanoid being. The cameraman, who claims to have had a top military clearance, told Santilli that in 1947 he was flown urgently to Roswell, where he filmed the recovery of several of these beings, both alive and dead, as well as the autopsy of one of them.
He set aside certain canisters of film which he felt there were problems in processing, and they needed special treatment during processing. The rest he sent straight back to Washington. And when he eventually processed the remaining canisters, he tried and went to great lengths to try and get Washington to come and pick the reels of film up, but they didn't. He kept it in a cardboard box, simple as that, and he kept it in his archive. The question of, well, is it a hoax, then goes back to the incident itself. What he saw was a disc, a flying disc that had crashed. It was on his back. He saw all these creatures that he calls freaks laying outside of the vehicle, screaming in pain for most of it. But he can't tell you where they came from. He doesn't know. While I was in his house, as you would expect with anyone of that age, he's got a great deal of memorabilia. You know, photographs on the wall, there's his photo albums, there's his diary. I mean, you can see his enrollment papers, his discharge papers. And he seemed a genuine enough person.
So why is Santilli unwilling to reveal the cameraman's identity?
Our agreement with the cameraman was to protect his privacy, which is how we acquired the footage in the first place. if he can get some kind of assurance that he's not going to be hounded by people, he may want to come out. I don't know. He may be watching this program right now and thinking, "What am I going to do?" His concern is, firstly, he's in his 80s. He just wants a peaceful life. That's the first thing. Secondly, he's accepted money, which is cash, and what effect is that going to have in terms of his tax position as well?
I think the pressure will increase upon him. I think he'll realise that if he is telling the truth, and I've no reason to doubt that, if this was, a crash of a space vehicle from wherever, that it is the most momentous event in human history, and he owes it to mankind to tell his story.
I'm going to bet you, and I've been doing this business for 30 years, that this man probably lives somewhere in Florida.
In order to verify the existence of this cameraman, we turned to world-renowned investigator William C. Deere.
When you all brought me this case to take a look at, I have to tell you, I was quite skeptical. Is there a cameraman? Does he really exist? Did he exist? And can I find him?
The answer really lies with the cameraman. That's where the answer lies, in trying to authenticate this film one way or the other.
We've satisfied ourselves that the footage is genuine. It's not a question of the diaries or a situation like that. All we're doing is we're placing it into the public domain and saying, look, here it is, please investigate it.
This film we're about to show you is either the first documentary evidence that an alien being visited our planet, or it's one of the most ambitious and fantastic frauds ever put on film. The alleged cameraman claims he shot the footage at Fort Worth Army Air Base. In a letter, he explains to us that one of the aliens discovered near Roswell had been secretly flown there for further study. This could be the world's first look at an actual being from another planet. You are watching the autopsy of what some say is an alien from outer space. Though silent, the 17-minute film is as dramatic as any science fiction thriller to come out of Hollywood. But this may not be a filmmaker's fantasy. This could very well be real. The strange body appears intact, except for an ugly wound on the right thigh. Two mysterious doctors wearing contamination suits study its bizarre features. A third person wearing a mask watches from behind the glass partition. Is this indeed a top-secret military autopsy performed on an alien in 1947? Like with any mystery, we need to hear from witnesses, examine the hard evidence, and bring in the experts. First, the eyewitnesses.
Daddy said they looked like a small 10-year-old child. The head was too large for the body, and the skin color was a pink with a kind of a gray cast to it. Of course, you can't tell skin color in this, but the size, the shape of the eyes, that would all pretty well fit.
The nurse that was supposedly there described an individual that may have looked somewhat like the individual that was being autopsied. The large head, the black eyes. I think she described 4 fingers rather than 6. So there's a discrepancy or difference there.
According to Frankie Rowe, her father discovered 3 beings still alive at the crash site.
He kept saying, there's no need for us to be afraid. They're not here to hurt us. And he said that he really felt badly that we couldn't help them.
The cameraman writes that he photographed 3 strange beings. Each was crying, clutching a box close to his chest. They cried louder as we approached, he writes. One of the officers managed to pry loose the box by hitting the being with the butt of his rifle.
I feel very sorry for whoever that was. If it was from some other world, planet, their family will never know what happened to them. They'll never go back home.
Of course, this could all be a story that the cameraman made up. An eyewitness testimony is sometimes unreliable, especially when it's almost 50 years old. What clues can we examine to determine whether what we're seeing is a true historical document or a clever fabrication? We've looked closely at some of the objects in the room. Our purpose? To determine whether they even existed in 1947. The wall clock, a General Electric model, is indeed from the 1940s. And that black phone with the heavy receiver and the curly cord is a Bell Standard model from 1937. Though they could all be purchased later, their presence in the room is nonetheless consistent with the time period. That brings us to the film itself. Can it be dated? We took the film to Larry Cate, who spent 16 years in the manufacturing division of Kodak.
Eastman Kodak Company, in trying to distinguish the age of the film, keeps track of the date of manufacture, and this is done through geometric codes. And the symbols on the edge code were a square and a triangle, which were used in Rochester, New York by Eastman Kodak Company to denote the following years of manufacture, 1927 or 1947 or 1967.
So the film stock itself could be from 1947. What about the way it was shot? What can the very look of the film reveal about its authenticity?
It would make much sense to think that, yes, this film could have been shot in the late 40s, early 50s.
Paolo Kerke-Uze is senior curator of motion pictures at Eastman House in Rochester, New York.
I'm often asked how difficult it is to fake a film. The answer is no. You cannot fake a motion picture that easily. It would require an amount of technical know-how, of sophistication, that would make the operation not worthwhile.
I have to say I feel that what we've seen here is a hoax.
Alan Davio is one of Hollywood's most acclaimed cinematographers. He was the director of photography on E.T., Bugsy, Empire of the Sun, and Congo. Davio is suspicious of the film because of how it regularly goes out of focus as if to hide what may not be real.
What we're seeing here is somebody photographing this intentionally letting the image go out of focus. It just doesn't make sense that he would go in and make no adjustment on the focus.
The fact that it lost focus is consistent with the type of equipment that they had to be using.
Roderick Ryan knows as much as anyone about what it was like filming for the military in the 1940s. A combat cameraman for the Navy, he photographed the most secret government projects during the 40s and 50s, including the atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll.
The cameras in general use at that time by the military were Filmo cameras made by Bell & Howell. The camera did not have through-the-lens focusing, so if it maintained focus, there could be the possibility that it was done with modern-day equipment, which you can maintain focus, and that it was simulated rather than real footage from 1947.
Davio was also suspicious of the film's authenticity because of the photographer's apparent inability to get the best shots.
There's one case in particular where they're sawing the skull, where the person operating the camera continuously moves to a place repeatedly that he's not going to see anything. The doctor's back.